I'm Meg Carney, the founding director of the Solstice MFA and Creative Writing Program here at Lasell University in Auburndale, Massachusetts. Welcome again to our winter 2023 evening reading series. And with this night's event featuring Josh Neufeld, We Hope, and Dzvinia Orlowsky. As we open this physical and virtual space, I want to acknowledge that the territory on which Lasell University stands is that of the Pawtucket and the Massachusetts people. Lasell's campus is a place to honor and respect the history of the Native and Indigenous communities who continue to reside in the area currently known as Massachusetts, and the continued efforts of their community leaders to ensure that history is not oversimplified or lost. This statement is one small step in acknowledging the difficult history that brought us to reside on this land and to help us seek understanding of our place within that history. Ownership of land is itself a colonial concept, and we acknowledge that the ideal restorative measure is to return land to Native and Indigenous communities. The Solstice MFA program of Lasell University seeks ways to be part of a better future going forward. As we grow, we pledge to seek out Native writers for our faculty and guest faculty. And meanwhile, we have established the DeBuse Fellowship for Native and Indigenous Writers, which will be granted to an incoming Solstice student annually. We hope to inspire others to take action as well. One way you might do so is to consider a gift to the Native Land Conservancy based in the area currently known as Mashpee, Massachusetts. For more information, you can look up the nativelandconservancy.org. Now, first up, we will have Josh Neufeld, who will be introduced by comics and graphic narrative student Corey Knight. Then writer in residence Lee Hope will be introduced by faculty member Kathy Aguero. And last, writer in residence Dzvinia Orlowsky will be introduced by poet alum, former grad assistant Becca Connors. So come on up, Corey.
Good evening. Our in-house graphic narratives guru has quite the professional resume. In addition to being a longtime artist for American Splendor and being published in Al Jazeera America, Cartoon Movement, and the Boston Globe, among others, Josh Neufeld also crafted the New York Times best-selling nonfiction graphic novel A.D., New Orleans After the Deluge, available for purchase over there, and illustrated another New York Times best-selling nonfiction graphic book, The Influence Machine. He received a Xeric Foundation grant in 2004 for his first book, A Few Perfect Hours and Other Stories from Southeast Asia and Central Europe, also available for purchase over there. I'm not getting kickbacks, I swear. Beyond crafting works, he also mentors and teaches others how to hone their own craft, including being an Atlantic Center for the Arts Master Artist in 2014, mentoring 8 associate artist cartoonists. He has also taught comics at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, as well as serving as a thesis advisor for students at the Center for Cartoon Studies and at Hunter College. Here at Solstice, he continues his dedication to teaching in our comics and graphic narratives focus, as well as specializing in mentoring the truly difficult student. He writes, he draws, he mentors, but wait, there's more. Josh has also been a part of the U.S. Department of State's Speaker and Specialist Program as a cultural ambassador, conducting workshops and delivering presentations around the world, a truly incredible position. It is a great honor to introduce Master of the Medium, and far better than Joe Sacco, Josh Neufeld.
Wow, untruths there at the end, but I'm flattered and honored. Thank you, Corey. So nice to be here again with my Solstice family and to read with Dzvinia and Lee. Thank you for your kind introduction and welcome. I'm going to be reading a piece of comics journalism. This was a piece that was commissioned by for me by Harvard Public Health Magazine last summer, and I published it in the fall. So it was for a special issue that the magazine was doing on health and reparations, and it originated from a group of American mayors in 2021 who formed a group called MORE, Mayors Organized for Reparations and Equity. And well, I'll talk more about what MORE does in the piece, but the editor basically came to me and said, here's this group of mayors who are organized around this issue, and why don't you select a city and a mayor to focus on for this piece? And I ended up finding the mayor of Kansas City, Quentin Lucas. So that's how the piece originated, and I think I'll just let the rest of it speak for itself. So as with all my pieces of comics journalism, the concept here is that everything that you see in terms of anyone speaking, any word balloons, are actual quotes that I got from them, or in a few cases from secondary sources. All the facts are real, and my drawings support the journalism that's inherent to the story itself. So this is Kansas City and the case for restitutional medicine. Hopefully this clicker will work. There we go. So that's just to show you a sample of the way that the pages look online and in the magazine. I'm going to zoom in on various panels so that you get a more guided tour of the artwork. But this is the way a typical set of pages work, and the panels relate to each other. Little delay here. Come on. Back. Back. Come on. You can do it. All right, there we go. Kansas City, Missouri, the 3rd district, present day. All too often, the health of a neighborhood mirrors the health of its residents. Brianna Parks Shaw, Kansas City Council member and co-chair of the city's Health Commission. In Kansas City, there are 18-year disparities in life expectancy between one zip code and another. The core cause of this is systemic racism, starting with redlining and other policies created to segregate people. This is what motivated me to run for office. On June 19th, 2021, the first official Juneteenth national holiday, Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas joined 10 other U.S. mayors to affirm his commitment to paying reparations for slavery. This is a conversation about how we can right the historical wrongs. What are reparations? There are many approaches, but most people agree that the reparations process starts with taking responsibility, acknowledgement, redress, closure. Justice Gatson, community activist and leader of Kansas City's Real Justice Network. Reparations is about repairing the harm that was caused during chattel slavery. Black people were not unharmed because emancipation happened or Juneteenth, and a real apology is needed to correct the harm. Reparations or restorative justice is also not about individual guilt. It is about governmental and institutional culpability for slavery, Jim Crow, separate but unequal, and the long list of harms that have followed. The MORE Coalition meant the leaders of such big cities as Los Angeles, Denver, Sacramento, and Kansas City were pledging to make good to those harmed by slavery and institutional racism. I think more than anything, we can say we did wrong and we can do better. Cities are still working out details, but the goal is to model different approaches which could give shape to a national response. As for Kansas City, Mayor Lucas imagines a programmatic series of investments rather than everybody Black in America getting a $3,000 check. So, can reparations be connected to health? The answer is yes. For one thing, numerous studies show that disease and death rates are elevated for marginalized racial and ethnic groups. It's well established that there are health costs from just being Black in America. In a 2021 paper published in Frontiers in Public Health, the authors state, when adjusting for other socio-demographic factors, being Black is independently associated with increased incidence of a variety of health conditions. Research shows that they are not due to innate biological differences, but rather influences of chronic and unremitting stress caused by racism. Compounding the issue, our country's history of racist medical practices is long and calamitous, including pernicious ideas such as Black people having a higher tolerance for pain or being more resistant to certain diseases, not to mention being forced into experiments during slavery. Or you talk about Henrietta Lacks and what her cells did for medical research, and yet her own family was denied what her cells did. You can't just ignore all the things that have happened to the bodies of Black people for research. It has a big part to play in restitution. The state of Missouri has third world numbers in terms of maternal mortality and infant mortality. In Missouri, Black women are 3 times as likely as white women to fall victim to maternal mortality, and there's double the amount of infant mortality compared to white babies. The systems in place are what create this disparity. Why Kansas City needs reparations. Residential segregation is considered the primary factor that influences health outcomes. Kansas City, Missouri, total population 508,000, Black population 152,000, 30% of total. In Kansas City's Black neighborhoods, this plays out in concentrated poverty, poor quality housing, endemic violence, and second-rate medical care. In my district, there is limited access to healthy fruits and vegetables. There's an overabundance of liquor stores, convenience stores, and dollar stores. In the 1930s, in an attempt to shore up the country's troubled housing mortgage market, a federal agency drew up maps of hundreds of US cities that divided neighborhoods into 4 types of zones. A, best, B, still desirable, C, definitely declining, D, hazardous. In Kansas City, most Black neighborhoods were classified as D, hazardous. The result was a city virtually split in half along Troost Avenue. Residential segregation worsened after 1954's Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court decision sparked white flight to the KC suburbs. The subsequent construction of the US 71 connector similarly divided the city. They cut a swath right in the middle of the Black community and displaced all these folks. Come back. That's Mickey Dean, retired civil servant and member of the Kansas City Reparations Coalition. Some studies show that the areas of KC that were designated as A, best, now produce 11 times more wealth than the redlined areas. And that's just measuring that from a contemporary perspective. This inequity goes back more than 8 decades. Remember Councilwoman Park Shaw's comments about life expectancy and by zip code? Let's compare 2 regions within Kansas City. Zip code 64113, population 93% white, average home value $305,000, average life expectancy 86.3 years. That's the city's highest. Zip code 64128, population 86% Black, average home value $50,000, average life expectancy 68.1 years. That's the city's lowest. Looking at the 2 zip codes, it's apparent that Black-owned homes are worth roughly 16% of white-owned residences. Much more troubling, though, is the 18-year difference in expected lifespans in those two areas. And that gap is getting worse. The other component is violence in the communities, gun violence, homicides. Appropriating dollars for violence prevention could be huge. There are previous examples of reparations-style health programs in the US. For instance, the community health center model as facilitated by Jack Geiger, MD. Another example is from the late 1960s. The Black Panther Party created an inner-city school breakfast program which spread to cities nationwide and later expanded to include community health care, ambulance services, and legal assistance. Sometimes planning for a healthier future means starting with something already in place. Uzazi Village, located in KC's urban core, was founded by Hakima Safunzi Payne in 2012 as a place to provide doula training and has since expanded to become a true maternity clinic. Uzazi also offers classes, support groups, including the Chocolate Milk Cafe for Black breastfeeding mothers, and more. It's a clinic model that's specifically geared toward the way Black women would do Black prenatal care if we asked them, because I did. Community-run nonprofits like Uzazi Village could be models for the future of reparative health in Kansas City. If we can make it work for the group that has the worst outcomes, then it will work for everybody else. Mayor Lucas has been meeting with community leaders, including Justice Gatson, on how to implement Kansas City's reparations program. How do I put this package together? How do I disperse it? If we have the coalition together by the fall, I will feel like our mayor is very sincere. I don't think he's stringing us along, because if he is, a lot of groups will come for him. One hopeful sign for reparations happened this past summer when the city won a $5 million grant to plan ways to restore Black neighborhoods severed by Highway 71. You can't go back to the past, but you can try to do better. That may not seem directly related to restitutional medicine, but healing a broken community sparks the imagination. We know what we need, but there's a huge gap. Reparations are in order. Never the end.
Short people's microphone here. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Lee Hope, whom I treasure as writer, literary citizen, and friend. Founder and former director of a low residency MFA program in Maine, Lee is also, in fact, a founder of the Solstice Low Residency MFA in creative writing, of which so many of us here are a part. So thank you, Lee. She is editor-in-chief of Solstice, a magazine of diverse voices, which now boasts 7,000 subscribers, and whose contributors have been nominated for and won many literary awards. She is as well currently president of the nonprofit Solstice Institute for Creative Writing and teaches for changing lives through literature, which brings literature to people on probation. And those of us with the good fortune to know her as friend and mentor are grateful for her support and gentle but incisive critique. Luckily, amidst all this activity supporting other writers and encouraging inclusion in publishing, Lee somehow finds time to write herself. For she is a fine writer, widely recognized for her fiction. Lee Hope is the author of the novel Horse Fever, which made its mark on the small press distribution bestseller list when it was published in 2016, and went on to be a finalist for the Midwest Book Awards. Her fiction has received grants from both the Maine and Pennsylvania Arts Commissions. Her short stories have been published in numerous literary journals such as Witness, the North American Review, Epiphany, and Sue Wester. And her short story, What to Take in Case of Fire, received an honorable mention in American Fiction, Volume 13. Lee is a writer who writes fiction that is readable, accessible, well-written, and page-turning compelling. Tonight, we'll have the pleasure of hearing her read from her novel, What to Take in Case of Fire, which explores, among other themes, class and spirituality. The two main characters, Natalie, child of an upper middle-class family, and Matthew, foster child, are connected as children and then later as adults. I currently read from this novel and was riveted by the character of Natalie. So hearing more from What to Take in Case of Fire, we're all in for a treat. Let us welcome the remarkable Lee Hope.
Thank you, Kathy, for an excessive introduction. I'm going to read from What's Taking Case of Fire, and we find out in the prologue that there is a fire and it did take a life. And now this is a little deeper into the novel. There's been a house break-in. Natalie is 13. This is Natalie's point of view, not Matthew's this time. And this is after the break-in of the house, and Matthew actually was the intruder. He's also 13, but was younger. He's not in the piece, so it doesn't really matter, I guess. Anyway, I'll just start. It takes place in the mid-80s. Okay. Long, slimy lizards slide in through open basement windows and coil in damp corners and wait for me in the dark. One slithers up the gray cement basement steps, slips under the kitchen door, and shifts from gray to brown as it glides up brownwood stairs to my bedroom. I leap up to my closet, nab an empty cigar box of Dad's, open the lid, flop the box upside down over the lizard. I lift the top to see if he's inside, just as he leaps to escape. I snap shut the lid and chop off his head. His brown body slowly curls, turns black. I wake up and lie very still in bed. I wonder if the robber has slid into the basement again. I can't ask my parents to check because Dad will say I'm not rational. I stay awake. In the morning at breakfast, I sit almost sleepless, and he's still in his tower room when Dad announces that he's going to a gun store at a strip mall off the White Horse Pike to buy a weapon for our protection. Then he will go to a private target range to practice. Dad also must believe the robber will return. I say, please, can I come along? Dad says, girls do not shoot guns. Sure they do. Take me. I was babysitting. I'm the victim. I deserve to go. Mother says, Natalie, a gun is the last thing you need. Siding with Dad, so we're at war. And before I know it, Dad has trotted upstairs, maybe to check on his son, maybe still asleep, maybe still innocent. But in minutes, Dad reappears and trots down the dark stairs, my brother, already in jeans and a Phillies hoodie, following right behind. They head straight to the front door while my little brother turns and flips me a quick goodbye wave, almost like flipping the bird, like maybe that robber did when he waved from the cop's cruiser in the rear seat. The door clicks shut. I stand in shock. Dad is taking 10-year-old Andy to the gun shop. St. Andrew, whom I babysit, will have to wait outside of the car. Where is the logic in that? Dad thinks he's the rational one, when I am. I run upstairs into my gray room, slam my door, lock it, throw myself onto my gray bed, and in my dim wall mirror appears a tiny speckled face, as shadowy as when I stood on the landing and told that little thief to wait. He obeyed, Maybe he couldn't clearly see my bad complexion or bony frame. Maybe I look better in the dark. Maybe that's why he warned me I might fall, as if he cared. Maybe the real villain is Dad for taking Andy, not me, to the shooting range. Maybe Dad should be punished more than that clear-skinned, treble-voiced little robber. But I would have to wait. When Dad and his son return home with a gun, I have too much pride to go see it, so Dad had time to ready to run. But that night, with both parents already in bed, I sneak up to Andy's room again. The stairs stopped creaking at a slant. I give our rat-a-tat knock and go into his space with its baby blue slanted walls and more trophies, board games, and comic books. Would he ever grow up? I step over to him, throw him on his bed, and say, Dad should have taken me, not you, to target practice. The thief aimed a gun at me alone on the steps, so I deserve to go along. Yeah, and he says, Dad's wrong again. Although Andy had walked out with Dad and flipped me the bird of the lamb. I can't get over it, I say, how it felt to be totally at the mercy of somebody else. The gun was unloaded, the cop said, but I didn't know that then. So what can you do to help, I asked. Andy just shrugged, a clueless little saint. How about when they're out showing me how to use Dad's gun? Andy says Dad wouldn't like that. Don't you want your sister to know how to protect herself? Robbers return to the scene of the crime. I could die an early death. How could you live with that guilt? Although I don't believe in guilt, all that agony for what? My little brother ponders and says, okay, I'll do it. I ask if he promises on pain of death. My usual vow for him. As usual, he says yes. I say that we'll practice the next time Mother and Dad go out, and then I add almost as if I forgot. It's our secret. For the next few weeks, while Dad's off running his mirror factory, Mother takes time off from her part-time job teaching dance at the local junior high. She needs her own cash, she said. When with Dad's bad investments, we might still go bankrupt. She hovered in the house to protect me from intruders, although she could not. Dad announced that the boy had been locked up in a medium security juvenile detention facility. For how long, I asked. Dad said the judge would sentence the kid at the hearing, and I must soon decide whether or not to testify. Only medium security, so the boy could still escape. But some nights in my dreams, with lizards and bumpy-stinging frogs and stabbing turtles with pointed noses still slid into the basement again through the same window open and cracked. They scuttle and wriggle and curl with slick tails, tucked like the creatures I caught in the swamp and kept in tin buckets of waters and fed flies, even as they scratched or shoved against the tin walls to escape until I let them loose. Even when I'm awake, it's as if they're about to take their revenge. One night, Mother started to go down to the basement, and I said, don't go. There are creatures hiding down there. Oh, Natalie, your imagination is working overtime again. I realized I must keep my nightmares secret so that Dad would think I'm irrational and under control, so Mother would not blame my imagination, so they'd both think I'm responsible enough to let me babysit Andy again, so he could give me secret lessons with that gun, the opposite of what Dad wants. Until finally, one day, Dad calls me into the apartment together for one of our talks. And he asks if I feel ready to discuss defending the case. I cross my legs, fold my hands into my lap, and sit up very straight to prove I'll be oh so rational. And I say yes. Dad says that the police want to interview me again. I say I refuse. It was like they were cross-examining me. And Dad says something about my not having to relive that crime. And as my little guardian, he can represent me. Does my father wish to take revenge on that boy or protect me? I say yes, you should. Natalie, I am pleased you are returning to normal. I say I'm as normal as I've ever been, which is a lie, but normality is often based on lies. And then Dad says he's got a new alarm system installed with motion projectors for all doors and windows. Nothing but the best. He intended to hire someone to watch over me, but mother said I should face up to it. So you can rise to the occasion, he said. Care for your brother? Mother and dad are always rising to occasions. I say in my most solemn voice, leave it to me. I've got to accept responsibility. Talking dad speak. At last, on Saturday night, mother and dad go to their club. Dad seems even more obsessed to make more contacts to sell more mirrors. As soon as their aging Mercedes drifts off, I order Andy to retrieve the gun. A 9mm Glock 19, good for concealed carry, Andy explains as if he owns it, from its overly obvious hiding place in Dad's underwear drawer beneath his boxer shorts. But when Andy ejects the cartridge, no bullets. They're hidden somewhere. Not even Andy knows about. Cagey, Dad can be a real snake. We sit on Mother and Dad's king-size bed with his red floral spread. Andy shows me how to hold the Glock, to sight it, to insert invisible bullets into the magazine, quickly and firmly inserting the clip. Just so like that. We take turns aiming at our parents' huge gold-framed mirror. Both of us reflecting, me pale and tall, him short and dark, but sometimes with a hand-in-hand gun clasped. We rehearse as intensely as we did for our Queen Cecily plays and for Alice in Wonderland, or as Andy did for his play Death Games. I said, remember when Bobby and you aimed to pretend guns at each other and shot until one of you dropped to the floor and moaned and writhed in death throes that lasted maybe 10 minutes, seemed like they'd never end? Andy's bad boy sighed again when I was the audience and applauded, although never convinced either was really dead. This time, I take the aim of the Glock at Andy in my parents' mirror. I squeeze the trigger, hear the click, squeeze, it clicks again and again until in the mirror, he finally falls to the carpeted floor, but does not moan or writhe. He lies perfectly stiff without a twitch, lies flat, motionless so long that I become fearful and say, okay, enough. Sit. At last he rises from the dead and we both laugh, and I clap my hands for his performance, because I sense as he resurrects that he is all I have, my one and only acolyte. That night, Andy is safely upstairs in his lofty bed. I lie sleepless and think that at first the robbery seemed like a performance too, as if that boy were playing the part of a robber in his dark hood. So I played the damsel in distress. And this time when I finally fall asleep, no lizards come, but after however long I wake, I have this distinct sense that the robber escaped and is lurking below. I slip out of bed and tiptoe across the hall to Mother and Dad's bedroom, where still out, and see in the gold-framed mirror a hassled, persistent girl in striped PJs. I step straight to Dad's second bureau drawer, reach in beneath his box with his shorts, slide off the black Glock, then tiptoe down the long, curling, dark stairs through the kitchen to the basement door, open it, point the gun into the dark, and call, if you're down there, come up now. I've got a gun. Not so much as a rustle or hiss. No boy rises up, no cheekbones too sharp, no eyes too shiny, dark, peering out of the shroud, no troubled voice like my brother's. At first, the thief was not a boy to fear, until he aimed a gun which I cannot forgive. I vowed to never again step foot in that basement, even though as a little girl I played down there and concocted vats of perfumes, mixing liquids from Dad's workshop and Mom's laundry room. List of ingredients: turpentine, clothes detergent, rubbing alcohol, ammonia, only 1 cup Clorox, because the warning label said Clorox is mixed with ammonia, a deadly gas. I stirred up the fur in a big aluminum tub, propped up in basement windows to air out the raunchy chemical stench, which I named flowery or earthy. And sometimes, for special care, I took safety matches, lit a few, and dropped them into the smelling mix, which should be combustible, shouldn't it? But no gaseous fumes rose up, and the small flames suffocated, fizzled, and died, and the worthless matchsticks floated on the oily surface. I don't know why I mixed up perfume with stank, or why I tried to sober the light, waited for a rush, whoosh, or why I poured liquid out into the utility sink before Mother or Jan or even Andy found it. or why I'm obsessed with the robber will return, even when I know he's locked up. In the morning, I go to Andy's room, shut tight his blue door, wake him up and say, I think maybe that robber and I have some sort of connection. He rubs his eyes, lies flat, and asks, what sort? Well, maybe that boy had a crush on me. Andy says, I wouldn't count on him. Why not? He must have been too busy robbing Dad's stuff to get a crush. But I still see that boy's bare face, dark eyes glowing hot and moist with its sheen as if I were him, as if on fire, as if he were smitten, as if I had power over him, and he obeyed my command to wait. So for a few moments he seemed like my shining knight, because he didn't escape when he had a chance. He seemed like the one who was trapped, not I, until I flicked the alarm switch and the silence hissed. Maybe he had a crush, I said. Maybe not. But I've decided to seek out a boyfriend. I'm going on the prowl. Why, Andy asks, lying on his back on a single bed in his blue PJs like a little kid, that already almost him. On his little table is across the continent board game, shaker and die, all set. His tiny metal trains ready to leave Union Station for the far north. To where the glaciers grow, he once said, as if ice is alive. I feel like telling them to sit up, get with it. Robbers could be on the loose, but I only say, I need a boy to protect me. I'll protect you, he says. Oh, you tried your best, but I babysit you. I need someone stronger, someone older. Like Dad? Oh, God, no, not nearly as old as that. Although as a little girl, I imagined running off the chain, just the two of us in his Mercedes, but he could only drive as far as the island to the bar of the state before he could reach home to his hallowed son. I say Dad is ancient, take my word for it. But I can tell from the way that Andy's eyes scoot up and away, he does not take my word. And he says, Dad's not that old. He's not old enough to die. Anybody can die at any time. Remember Doug the Pug? Doug, smart enough to escape, but dumb enough to run into the highway and get squashed by a semi. Andy thinks a second. Not you and me, we're just kids. Does he really believe we'll always be like this? The two of us against the world? But I say, no, not us. But he has to add, and not Dad, and not Dad. Andy has not yet pressed, but such a dad would invite his little, immature son, not his big, mature daughter, to the shooting range, so that she is forced to have secret lessons with his unloaded Glock, and now must find an aggressive boyfriend to protect herself. That such a dad does not fit into the modern world, and such a dad must be relegated to the trash heap. But I keep that thought secret. Why disillusion with a little middle school kid, lying defenseless on his back in his blue jammies on top of his blue print baseball dress spread, skinny arms still outspread, as if life were safe? One day I might have to teach him that life isn't as the rabbi taught me.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Connors, and I'm a graduate of the Solstice MFA Creative Writing Program. I graduated with the first pandemic cohort in the summer of 2020, and I'm so honored to be here tonight in person to introduce Dzvinia Orlowsky. Dzvinia Orlowsky is a Pushcart Prize poet and award-winning translator, including a 2016 National Endowment for the Arts Literature Translation Fellowship. Her latest book of poetry, Bad Harvest, delves into family, marriage, the body, and how these dynamics play out against the backdrop of famine and conflict. She never shies away from the bleakest moments, like in her poem, Eating Grass, which is part of a sequence of poems in which she writes, no livestock, no chickens, no crumbs. Hunger, if it could open its mouth wide enough, open its wide enough, open wide enough. Hunger would tear out the windows. Yet, even with the depictions of hardship and loss, her poems are often filled with wry observations that remind us of our own humanity. And as such, it is no surprise to me that she's published 6 poetry collections by Carnegie Mellon Press, including A Handful of Bees, reprinted for the Carnegie Mellon University Classic Contemporary Series, Convertible Night, Flurry of Stones, winner of a Sheila Mawton Book Award, and the aforementioned Bad Harvest, which was a 2019 Massachusetts Book Awards must-read in poetry. Most recently, it has been her translation work that has received many accolades. Her co-translations with Ali Kinsella from the Ukrainian Natalka Orlowsky poems, Eccentric Days of Hope and Sorrow, published by Lost Horse Press in 2021, was a finalist for the 2022 Griffin International Poetry Prize, Alta's National Translation Award in Poetry, the Derek Walcott Poetry Prize, and the winner of the AAUS Translation Prize. A founding poetry faculty member of the Solstice Residency MFA program, she is currently writer-in-residence in poetry and is also contributing poetry editor to Agni as well as the Solstice Literary Magazine, where she is also the founding director of Night Riffs, a Solstice-sponsored reading music series. And most recently, and maybe most importantly, she's been using her voice to raise awareness about the Russian invasion and ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Please help me welcome Dzvinia Orlowsky.
Thank you so much for that. That was very, very generous. Thank you, Meg, Clinton, Solstice community for inviting me here. I'm really, really thrilled to be here. And I want to say thank you, Ellen, for all your generosity in helping me around. Same thing with Kathy. And Becca, again, thank you for that introduction. It's a real honor to read with Josh and Lee, so thank you for that as well. Just talking on the side of my mouth. Okay. I would love to read a couple of translations just because I've been steeped in that work, and I would love to take the opportunity to introduce you possibly to 2 voices, possibly a third, coming from a country that hasn't been at war for years, been at war for forever, and very intensely for the past 8 years. And because every attempt is being made to erase the culture, the people, the language, the literary works, it's really an honor to be able to share the work that I've done in the past couple of years. So the first, I'll read one translation, is from the Natalka Orlowsky, Eccentric Days of Hope and Sorrow. And Natalka's poetry was known for the quiet power of despair and lyricism, and became the hallmark for writing in Ukraine in the 80s and 90s. She still continues to be influential, but the reason that Ali Kinsella and I chose her work is because even though she's been translated in some anthologies, there's never been like a full comprehensive selected collection. And we thought there's so much writing coming out of the current situation, which is true, fabulous writers, but there's these big chunks of voices that haven't been published that kind of help explain how we got to where we are, unfortunately, right now. So I wanted to, as her example, read a poem called May, about the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. And horrifically enough, one of Russia's strategies is to bomb or compromise the nuclear facilities in Ukraine. So even though this happened so long ago, one would think, oh, will this happen again? It's happening, only more deliberately. This is a long poem, but I'm just going to read one section of it in English. Yes, we passed through that terrifying spring of scorching sun and radiant leaves, of wasteland abundance of a mechanically fertile world, God's invisible first impulses of mutations in flowers, Maybe a new humanity will arise from them one day after us, just as we too arose from near extinct lizards, ruins of cells. Yes, we survived that spring until recently, weak school children appeared, milk damp on their lips, poets who no longer hurt. We, passive, inert, and others put out the fire, the reactor's red heat. We, in our white robes, holding dosimeters in police epaulets, in military uniforms, young pregnant women and girls with children unborn, victims and rescuers in the hot heart of Europe. So that's the Palkabilis. The poet that Ali and I are translating now, Helena Krug, and we're very fortunate because Lost Rose Press is going to be putting on a collection next year of her poetry, or translations. Is a very different poet. She's younger. She's 48, and the Palka, who is closer to my age, early 50s, used a lot of metaphor and figurative language, and Helena is much more of a direct speaker. And she actually has a wonderful essay that's online available by Euromaidan Press called War is Not a Metaphor. And I'm going to read this one poem. I'm going to read it in Ukrainian first so that you can just kind of get lost in the sounds of the language, and then I'll read the English. Носимося зі своїми мертвими, як діти. Поскладали їх на майдан, обступили колом, на морожі, на снігу, розгублені, ніби ніхто з нас досі не знав, що померти так просто. Кожен все ще надіється, що полежать і встануть, бо що казати їхнім мамам, що казати їхнім дітям, хто їм скаже про найгірше. Людина біжить насустріч кулі із дерев'яним щитом, із гарячим серцем, із головою в лижному шоломі, повному крові. Мамо, я в шапці, кричить у мертву трубку. Мамо, у нього надто тонка шапка, сидить куля. We carry our dead like children, lay them out in the plaza and encircle them in the frost, the snow, bewildered as if none of us yet knew it was so easy to die. Everyone still hopes they will lie there and then get up. For what shall we tell their moms? What to tell their children? Who will tell them the worst? A person runs to meet a bullet with a wooden shield and a hot heart and a head in a ski helmet full of blood. Mom, I've got my hat on, he shouts into a dead phone. Mom, his hat is too thin, the bullet hisses. Helena's husband is in the front lines too, fighting, so she's writing from a very urgent, immediate place. I did a class on form on the Pantone and Villanelle, and so I thought I would read a couple of centos, not sure, but there's some debate how that's pronounced. And this also introduces another writer, because these centai are based on one poet. So I'm not, in the more traditional sense, gathering a lot of voices from a lot of people. I'm focusing on this one writer. And Jadad is, I think he's like 48, but he's written like dozens of poetry books and novels. And he's in a rock band. And he's just sort of the leading voice of Ukraine. And he's dissident and activist. And actually won the 2022 German prize. Peace Prize, and was a nominee for the Nobel Prize in Literature. So he's truly outstanding. So I had the good fortune early on this past year of being invited to read with him. And they were celebrating him and 2020. And Dzvinia Orlowsky and one of the people who translate his work said, we want you to read something, write something that interacts with his poems in some way. So I thought, okay, this is 2020, let me see what I can do. So I took this book called What We Die For, What We Live For, What We Die For, and I pulled out all the 20 lines in the entire book. And I just kind of like tossed them in the air, and I thought, okay, I've got like 70, 20 lines. Can a poem be formed out of this? And I did come up with an interesting poem, and it was a thrill to read it in front of Shadan. But it got me thinking, because then I got hooked. I did on first lines and last lines and 8th lines and 15th lines. I wrote a total of 9, but I started thinking, is there something that we do in our first line that we're not aware of? Is there a certain kind of voice that comes out? Is there something we do midway in a poem that we're not aware of, that we kind of turn to? Does a different kind of voice come out in our last line? So these are, in a sense, studies of his first and whatever lines. And I haven't changed them at all. They're pretty much exactly the way they appear. And I thought they produced some interesting poems. So I'll just read 2 of them. Gentle One, What We Live For, What We Die For, based on first lines by Sergei Shadan. Take only what is important. Take the letters, the dark, shattered, wicked winter. You hear everything passing. Stories connected with murders, knife wounds. Remember how winter began in your town. The hot heart of the year is burning. Where are you coming from, dark caravan, you flock of birds? You will reply today, touching the warm letters. Make sure. And I'll skip over to Gentle 5, What We Live For, What We Die For, based on end lines by Sergei Shadan. Let their journey be easy. Let them be rescued in time under the burning sky. And really, it is nothing, a smell of corpses. We'll say there's no reason to write about this at all. The cities freeze in the night. Stars around your heart. Fly into its light. No one will be too late. I know, I thought it was fascinating. What's it like last line? Oh. I'm actually going to read 2 more poems. And this is from a new manuscript that I'm working on called Those Absences Now Closest. And these literally I just finished like a week or 2 ago. So in the tradition of testing here, I will continue that. And these are a little bit lighter in tone. So this one is called Beets and Turnips and Kale. Thick coat of dust on the lid, gold borscht, best used by 2020, 2 years gone. Moved from discount to the international aisle, then back to discount. Sad neighbor of matzahs and buckwheat. I'll tell my guests it's holy, which means served on starched white linen embroidered with JJH, my husband's initials. Like a prayer off limits to hunger, an animal tired of its own blood, it is stained the cloth. The tail end of leftover soup will disappear down the drain, leave no trace for another year. The teen boy cashier avoids my eyes. Who eats this stuff? Turnips roll on the conveyor belt, like heads of wrinkled, bearded old men. Could easily be for my former husband or past lovers. The boy doesn't bother to ask what the fresh bunch of kale is used for. Beats me. He brings it up as Christmas decoration. Management material. All right, if I had a voice, I would sing part of this, but maybe I'll just do body language or something. When it's referring to the song, but I think everybody here knows, thank God, what I'm referring to. Back in the USSR, Lennon and McCartney, in 3 sections. 1, we weren't the Beach Boys California girls, weren't the cutest in the world, no French bikinis cut to fit our McDonald's and Coca-Cola bodies. We bit eyes and a mouth into bologna slices, laid the cool skin masks against our faces, sprayed sun in on our ash blonde hair until it streaked bright yellow, a signature book, free, almost graffitied, like yellow snow. Once I surfed Lake Erie to my sister's cheers, stood up on a rental board, balancing for a minute, the tiny wave beneath me lifting and curling just long enough to make it count, though I'm not sure what for. Oh, Maria, Chris, Mimi, Natalie, even our theme park tissue flower power balloons held seductively against our hips. Oh, steamy dance halls in the dark never sparked a glance from any boy. 2, we swore we'd end up marrying each other, exchange vows with dyed good luck rabbit's feet, keychains for keys we'd most likely never own, doors that open to beauty queens who waved from county fair floats pulled by tractors. Then Paul McCartney sang it. The Ukraine girls really knocked me out. What? They leave the West behind? Really? Back in the USSR, the USSR. Our popularity was sealed. We began waving by our phones. 3, we didn't appreciate irony back then. Come and keep your comrades warm. My father's heated over my dead body. Let me hear your balalaikas ringing out. No patriotic Ukrainian plays a Russian balalaika. But the Ukraine girls knocked somebody out. Soon we too would be called to ecstasy, snow-peaked mountains. Honey, disconnect the phones. How exciting at night to rub bright purple rabbit fur against our faces, gently pressed to our lips the tips of crescent nails. We wallowed in the luck we believed they continued to bring. Useless, sad, saturated relics dangling from small chains.
Wow, another amazing solstice evening. Thank you, Dzvinia Orlowsky, Lee Hope, and Josh Neufeld. We have one more solstice round of applause.